Well, we're going to try to make the sourdough biscuits. Okay, you're going to start with the biggest bowl you've got. This is like a 3-gallon bowl, I think. And you start with 3/4 of a cup of flour. I've been using cake flour because it's got less protein. Supposedly should make things more tender. And that is, as you know, I love going by weight, 130 grams. Okay, there is 80, 97, 111, 125, 129, 130 on the nose. Okay, and then I'm going to throw in half a teaspoon of kosher salt. In this case, it's coarse sea salt, and a teaspoon and a half of baking powder. Okay, and I'm going to mix it up with my fingers. I'm sure there's a better way of doing that, but that's what I got. Okay, then we take out a box grater, and in the freezer I have stashed a stick of butter. Theoretically, you're using unsalted butter, but seriously, what's the point? Who in the world uses unsalted butter? Okay, so it's frozen, and so it doesn't melt all over my fingers, I'm dipping it in the flour, and we're going to grate the whole stick of butter. And every now and then, as my fingers warm it up, we'll just recoat it. Boom. It doesn't take that long. We're about halfway through. By the way, a stick of butter is half a cup. So you could use half a cup of butter-flavored shortening, would probably work. Also, it is 8 tablespoons. But the easiest way is just to use a stick of butter. Okay, so there you go. We're almost there. And try not to shred my fingers, because then it's not vegetarian anymore. And when it gets down to that small, I think we can consider that shredded. Okay. And that's pretty much the whole stick. So I'm going to toss the butter in the flour mixture. I'll even rub it in a little bit with my fingertips. I've started doing my pie crusts the same way. I don't know if that makes it better or not, but I don't know. It feels authentic. Okay, so I'm making a nice little bed of flour there. And, okay, I'm carrying out the scale. That means I'm setting it to 0. And I have some nice, fluffy, bubbly sourdough starter. And my recipe calls for a cup of it. And I've measured this a couple of times, and that is 264 grams. So we're at 0. And that is 161. $211. And what did I say? It said 264. So at this point, I'm going to need a spoon. Okay, so that is 238. $267. I'm going to call that close enough. I figure if being off by 3 grams is too much of variance, then this is too persnickety for me. And at this point, it's vitally important for the chef to have a little refreshment. This is a chocolate mint martini. Okay. Now, again, with my fingers, I'm sort of coating the sourdough starter with the buttery, floury, whatever it is. Okay? And it is very determined that it's not going to absorb all that flour. This is where some convincing comes into play. All right. So I am patting this out so that it is roughly 5 inches by 7 inches-ish, a rough rectangle. At this point, it's much more of a oval than a rectangle. And I'm just pushing it around. It's wet. It easily gets damp as I'm pushing it. Okay. Now I'm going to make what I call a book fold. Boom. Right? And so we've gone from 1 layer to 3. And it's still kind of dampish, which is good because we got a lot of flour and butter to absorb. And so we're going to book fold it again. And once it gets sticky, we flip it over and book fold it again. Oh, hey, look. You see how it's kind of coming together more symmetrically than it was before? You can actually make a rectangle. Okay, book fold. And at this point, I should have a fascinating story about biscuits. I don't know that I do, except that some of my online British friends have been very confused lately. They hear Southern Americans talking about biscuits and gravy. And to the Brits, biscuits are crispy cookies like Chips Ahoy or Oreos. And so biscuits and gravy sounds absolutely disgusting to them. And I was trying to explain online the magical, almost religious place that biscuits have in the American culture, especially in the South. And that there are grown men, black and white, who will actually tear up and cry thinking of their mama's biscuits. Someone online was saying, yeah, but I traveled in the States, and I was in the South, and at the hotel they were serving biscuits and gravy, and it didn't seem that special. And I'm like, come on. Would you trust a restaurant's Yorkshire pudding? Seriously, would you? And the reaction was, well, that's Yorkshire pudding. Yeah, that's something special. It's like, well, there you go. Now, I haven't been counting, but at this point, we've been tripling the number of layers every time I do a book fold. And that must be 7 or 8 or 9 book folds I've done. Okay. At this point, we've pretty much absorbed most of the flour. So I am patting this out to about the thickness of my thumb. Okay. Now this is what they said on America's Test Kitchen. And if you can't trust Julia Colin Davidson, I mean, who can you trust? So we're going to go with a bench scraper. A chef's knife would probably work. We're going to cut off the edges here. This is because patting it out like this has kind of pinched the edges together so that they will be less resistant, or they'll be more resistant to rising. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut this into 6 biscuits. Boom, boom, boom. Okay. And I have a baking sheet. Now, you could use a greased or ungreased baking sheet. You could use parchment paper, but I'm using a seal pad. Now, you're saying to yourself, being a good Yankee, you're saying, what, you're just going to leave those ends? Oh, silly, silly woman. Of course not. Okay, we're going to pinch them together into a snake, and we're going to roll these into a different biscuit shape. Okay. And here we go. Okay. Now, some recipes call for adding a teaspoon of sugar to the mix. I didn't do it this time. What that's going to do is caramelize and make these a little browner. So I think what I'm going to do is, might be heresy, but I'm going to sprinkle just a skosh of cinnamon. Sorry, I just made snickerdoodles. Just a skosh of white sugar on there to help with the browning. Now, this is where we leave the realm of science and enter the realm of art. Because depending on any number of variables, this could take anywhere from 12 to 25 minutes. I'm going to put this in timer for 17 minutes. With my particular oven, that has been the most reliable. Okay, so I'm going to spend the next 15 minutes or so cleaning up my counter. I'll be right back. Okay, it's been 17 minutes and the rest of a chocolate mint martini, and the world is looking somewhat more promising. I'm going to check on the biscuits, and looking at them, I'm going to say that the sugar was probably the right move. If you look at these carefully, you'll see that they've got a little bit of a golden brown texture. The biscuit on the lower right-hand side clearly got pinched a little bit on the one side, and so it tended to puff up. But if you look, you can see that there are many, many layers there. And I'm going to let these cool down for about 10-15 minutes. And, well, let's say 45 to put them into a container to give to friends tomorrow. But I'm going to say that at least one of them has to be a bench test with, I bought some cultured butter. So I'm going to see how that does. Anyway, so the key here, frozen butter, cake flour,